Ever wonder what secrets were hiding in Grandma's pantry? These 27 forgotten staples kept families fed, flavors rich, and traditions alive. Some might even be in your kitchen today. Some call us nostalgic, others say we're just old souls. But the truth is, many of us grew up weaving through our grandma's kitchens and cozy little homes, drawn in like moths to warmth. It felt like magic, watching her craft meal after meal, feeding us like royalty with flavors we still dream about. But her secret wasn't a wand. It was a pantry packed with humble treasures. Here are 27 timeless foods that made Grandma's pantry feel like a portal to another world. 1. Lard, pure rendered pork fat, was once the heart of American kitchens, going back to colonial times. Before vegetable oil took over, lard was the go-to fat for cooking and baking. It made pie crusts shatteringly crisp and biscuits unbelievably tender. Cheap, easy to get, and incredibly versatile, it handled high heat like a champ. Grandmas often made it themselves after a pig slaughter or picked it up fresh from the butcher. From frying up eggs to greasing baking pans, lard was everywhere. Its deep, rich flavor brought soul to countless family dishes and was one of her best-kept secrets. 2. Salted pork. To American grandmas, salted pork was gold. Whether it was tossed into beans, added to stews, or tucked into cornbread, it brought intense flavor and hearty satisfaction. Back before fridges were common, salting was the safest way to preserve meat. Cuts like belly or shoulder were heavily salted and cured, lasting for months. In the 17th and 18th centuries, it was a lifeline for settlers braving long winters or traveling miles with no fresh food in sight. It wasn't just a meat, it was protein security. Its saltiness and staying power made it a pantry MVP that grandmas from every state leaned on. 3. Homemade pickles. Pickles weren't just a side dish, they were a way of life. Before refrigeration, pickling was a smart and tasty way to preserve garden veggies. Cucumbers were the usual choice, gathered in big bunches during the summer and packed in vinegar or brine for the colder months. For grandmas, making pickles wasn't just practical, it was a tradition. Recipes were handwritten, passed down, and sometimes fiercely guarded. Whether sweet, sour, or garlic-packed, their jars of pickles were tangy reminders of love and resourcefulness, and the smells from that pantry still linger in our memories. 4. Root vegetables. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and turnips. These earthly heroes were staples in Grandma's kitchen. Root veggies added depth to soups, sweetness to roasts, and heartiness to stews. Potatoes turned into buttery mash or crispy fries, while onions melted down to give meat that rich, golden flavor. Best of all, they grew easily in backyard gardens, right outside Grandma's kitchen window. She'd tend to them lovingly, turning them into meals that felt like hugs. Their durability and versatility made them family meal foundations, wholesome, dependable, and deeply nostalgic. 5. Sauerkraut may have German roots, but American grandmas, especially those with European heritage, adopted it with pride. This fermented cabbage dish has been around for over 2,000 years, originally created to preserve veggies through long, icy winters. German immigrants brought it to American shores, and it quickly became a pantry staple. Stored in glass jars or stone crocks, it lasted for months and added a zesty kick to sausage and pork. It was believed to aid digestion and cut through fatty meals. But more than that, it was a symbol of thrift, tradition, and cultural pride, passed down one jar at a time. 6. Sugarloaf. Before sugar came pre-packaged in tidy bags, it arrived as a rock-solid cone called a sugarloaf. These heavy blocks of sweetness were a kitchen essential in the 18th and 19th centuries. Grandmas would crack pieces off with a sugar hammer whenever it was time to bake pies, sweeten tea, or whip up a batch of jam. Especially in rural homes, sugar loaves were prized and rationed with care. They brought joy to birthdays, holidays, and every sweet bite in between. They weren't just sugar, they were part of a sweet ritual shared across generations. 7. Crackers. Simple, crunchy, comforting. Crackers have been in American pantries since the early 1800s. Made from flour, water, sometimes a little fat, and baked until crisp, they were an easy go-to for snacks, soups, or spreading with butter. Grandmas always had a tin of them ready. They were a quick comfort food, perfect with cheese or crumbled into a bowl of tomato soup. Some were homemade, others bought at the store, but they all had a place at the table. Sometimes the simplest foods leave the strongest memories. From simple, hard-baked rounds to the endless varieties we love today, crackers have come a long way. Their journey started with early European settlers who brought over the age-old tradition of baking dry flatbread as a method of preservation. By the 1800s, crackers had found their place in American kitchens. And with the rise of commercial baking in the 1850s, brands like Nabisco made them widely available and wildly popular. To American grandmothers, crackers were more than just a snack. They were a pantry essential. Affordable, long-lasting, and endlessly useful, crackers could be served solo or paired with soups, stews, or slices of cheese. They even helped inspire Depression-era staples like sardines on crackers. Grandmas used them for quick appetizers, topped them with jam or butter for treats, and made them part of the everyday meal routine. Whether dipped in tea or crunched with a glass of milk, crackers were cozy, familiar, and full of flavor. One bite, and we're back at her kitchen table. 8. Homemade jams. For those with a sweet tooth, this next one is a real treat. Homemade jams were the heart of Grandma's pantry, crafted with care, sealed in glass jars, and packed with the taste of summer. Jam making wasn't just a way to preserve fruit, it was a tradition, a ritual, a labor of love. Grandmas would gather berries, peaches, and plums from their gardens or nearby farms, cook them down with sugar, and carefully spoon the thick, glistening goodness into jars. It was all about savoring the harvest year-round. Even when snow fell and the garden slept, jam brought summer back to the breakfast table. Spread on toast, layered in cakes, or spooned into yogurt, it turned any meal into a celebration. Jam-making days were often family affairs too. Hot kitchens, sticky fingers, and that rich, fruity aroma hanging in the air. And if you were lucky, Grandma would hand you a jar to take home, tied with a ribbon and sealed with love. 9. Oatmeal. Next up, a breakfast classic that warmed countless mornings, oatmeal. Made by simmering oats in water or milk, this hearty dish was a staple in many grandma kitchens. Whether it came in the form of old-fashioned rolled oats or the tubular steel-cut variety, oatmeal was prized for its filling nature and reliable nutrition. For American grandma, it was the perfect way to start the day. Simple, affordable, and endlessly adaptable. A spoonful of brown sugar, a pat of butter, a dash of cinnamon, or a handful of fresh fruit turned this humble bowl into something magical. But oatmeal wasn't just for breakfast. It showed up in cookies, dessert bars, even savory dishes. With a long shelf life and nourishing power, oats were a no-brainer for any pantry. Warm or cold, sweet or savory, oatmeal was the quiet hero of the kitchen. Comfort in a bowl. 10. Wafers. And now, a snack that sweetened many childhood afternoons. Wafers. These thin, crisp cookies, made from flour, sugar, and a touch of vanilla, might have originated in Europe, but American grandmas turned them into something special. Light and delicate, they were perfect for nibbling alongside coffee or tea, or sneaking from the cookie jar when no one was looking. But wafers weren't just about snacking. Grandmas used them in desserts too, layering them with pudding or whipped cream for no-bake cakes and trifles. With just a few ingredients, they could build an elegant dessert in minutes. Whether sandwiched with chocolate, stacked into icebox cakes, or served plain on a little saucer, wafers added a bit of sweetness to ordinary days. They were a reminder that joy could be simple and always within reach on Grandma's pantry shelf. Because they were easy to make, required just a few simple ingredients, and could stay fresh for ages, wafers were a go-to treat in Grandma's kitchen. Many grandmothers even made their own from scratch, adding personal touches like a sprinkle of powdered sugar or a drop of almond extract. These special variations often found a place in their handwritten recipe books, treasured collections meant to be passed down through generations. But wafers were more than just a sweet bite. They were a symbol of the warmth and hospitality that defined so many of our grandmothers' homes. With just a few pantry staples, Grandma could whip up something comforting and delightful, reminding us all of her magic touch in the kitchen. 11. Powdered eggs. Next up, a surprising favorite among grandmas everywhere. Powdered eggs. These dried eggs became a household staple, especially during the early to mid-20th century. Although the technique for drying eggs was developed in late 1800s, it wasn't until World War II, with rationing in full swing, that powdered eggs really took off. After the war, they remained common, particularly in rural areas or homes watching every penny. To grandmothers, powdered eggs were a pantry lifesaver, long-lasting, dependable, and incredibly useful. Whether baking cakes and cookies, making scrambled eggs, or thickening a sauce, these eggs could be rehydrated with water and used in nearly any recipe. More than just a substitute, powdered eggs were a testament to a grandmother's ability to adapt and nourish her family, even when times were hard. They were a quiet symbol of resilience tucked away in a kitchen drawer. 12. Kidney soup. Our next item may not appear on many modern menus, but it was a hearty favorite in Grandma's time. Kidney soup. Made with beef or pork kidneys, simmered alongside vegetables and spices. This dish was a smart and nourishing meal, especially popular during lean years like the Great Depression and World War II. For many grandmas, kidney soup was more than a way to stretch dollar. It was a celebration of whole animal cooking, where nothing went to waste. Kidneys, rich in protein, iron, and vitamins, were a nutritious foundation. Paired with onions, carrots, potatoes, and a flavorful broth, the soup became a warm, filling staple that could feed a whole family without breaking the bank. Often cooked in big batches and sometimes served with cornbread, kidney soup represented a kind of love built on practicality. One pot of comfort that brought everyone to the table. 13. Homemade vinegar. This next pantry essential may have made our eyes water, but it was a cherished homemade item in Grandma's kitchen. Vinegar. Whether it was apple cider, vinegar made from fermented apples, or malt vinegar from grains, grandmas knew how to make it from scratch. The process was slow but satisfying. Sugar became alcohol, then fermented into tart, tangy vinegar. Most grandmothers preferred their homemade versions to store-bought ones, savoring the deeper flavors and the joy of crafting it themselves. Vinegar played many roles, used in dressings, marinades, pickles, and most importantly, in preserving fruits and vegetables. It added brightness to stews and soups, cut through the richness of meats, and even made its way into pie crusts. Beyond the kitchen, it was a multi-purpose miracle, used for cleaning, soothing sore throats, and even conditioning hair. Our mate, vinegar, was the unsung hero of Grandma's pantry. Sharp, strong, and made with care. 14. Hardtack. Now here's one that might make your teeth ache just thinking about it. Hardtack. A dense, dry biscuit made from nothing more than flour, water, and salt. Hardtack originated as a military ration, but over time it made its way into American households, especially those of grandmothers who appreciated its durability and simplicity. Known for its rock-hard texture and near-endless shelf life, hardtack was tough to chew but easy to store, ideal for long travels or tough winters. It could be softened in soup, soaked in milk, or crumbled into stews to add bulk. Some grandmas even fried it with butter or added a bit of jam to make it more palatable. Though it wasn't the most glamorous item in the pantry, hardtack symbolized survival, frugality, and the kind of strength that came from making do with what you had. The Civil War made hardtack a battlefield necessity, prized for its ability to survive months, sometimes years, without spoiling. But even after the war, hardtack found a second life in American households, especially where frugality and resourcefulness ruled the day. To our grandmas, the advent of hardtack must have felt like a small miracle. Simple, tough, and endlessly dependable. Its rock-hard texture meant it could sit in a pantry for ages, ready to be called into action during hard times like the Great Depression, or when trips to the store just weren't possible. Grandmothers softened it in water, milk, or broth, then served it with butter, jam, or syrup to make it easier and tastier to eat. Though far from fancy, hardtack was a quiet kitchen hero, a durable reminder of survival and making do. 15. Molasses. Now let's sweeten things up a bit with molasses, a dark, syrupy byproduct of sugar production that added rich, bold flavor to American kitchens long before white sugar became a staple. Derived from sugarcane or sugar beets, molasses was an essential ingredient in early American baking, giving life to gingerbread, molasses cookies, and old-fashioned fruitcakes. Its thick texture and deep, slightly tangy sweetness made desserts moist and chewy, while also enriching homemade barbecue sauces, meat glazes, and marinades. For grandmas, molasses was more than a flavor enhancer. It was a pantry essential. Cheap, shelf-stable, and widely available, it offered an affordable way to sweeten recipes when refined sugar wasn't on hand. Some families even used it medicinally for its iron-rich content or as a home remedy for constipation. In every spoonful, molasses carried both a practical purpose and a bit of old-time comfort. 16. Cupcakes. From humble beginnings to birthday parties and bake sales, cupcakes have stood the test of time, and our grandmothers loved them just as much as we do. These small, single-serve cakes date back to the 19th century, but really found their place in the hearts of American families, thanks to their simplicity, adaptability, and sweet charm. Grandmas made them often because they didn't require much, just flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and baking powder. No fancy tools, no hours of labor, just simple ingredients whipped into joy. Whether baked for an afternoon snack, a family gathering, or a surprise treat for the kids, cupcakes were practical and personal. Each one could be frosted, decorated, or left plain, whatever fit the moment. They brought comfort in hard times and celebration in good ones, and thanks to their small size, were perfect for sharing with love. 17. Popcorn. Now here's one you probably guessed, it's popcorn. This light, crunchy snack has deep roots in Native American traditions, where it was discovered that certain kernels would explode into fluffy bites when heated. By the 19th century, popcorn had gone mainstream, and by the early 20th century it was everywhere, from street vendors to living rooms. For grandmas, popcorn was a pantry must-have. Kernels were cheap, long-lasting and endlessly versatile. All it took was a pot, a little oil and some heat, and you had a bowl full of joy ready in minutes. Seasoned with salt, drizzled with butter, or even coated in caramel, popcorn was the perfect homemade snack. Whether it was movie night, an afternoon pick-me-up, or a special treat for the grandkids, popcorn was always there, popping away like a warm reminder of simple pleasures. 18. Sourdough starter. Our next entry may have fallen out of fashion for a time, but it's making a comeback. Sourdough starter. In Grandma's day, this bubbling, living mix of flour and water was the heart of many kitchens. It captured wild yeast and friendly bacteria from the air, slowly fermenting to create that signature sour tang and beautiful rise in bread. Keeping a sourdough starter alive was a labor of love. It had to be fed, tended and cared for, like a member of the family. But in return, it could produce loaf after loaf of flavorful, hearty bread without the need for commercial yeast. To grandmas, sourdough starter was more than just a baking tool. It was a symbol of patience, skill, and old-world knowledge. It turned the most basic ingredients into something rich and satisfying, and in many homes, a little jar of starter passed from generation to generation, filled with history and flour. That living, bubbling sourdough starter wasn't just a lump of flour and water, it was a symbol of tradition and resourcefulness. To get it going, Grandma would simply mix equal parts flour and water in a bowl or jar and leave it out at room temperature. Over several days, she'd feed it with more flour and water while wild yeast from the air went to work, fermenting the dough until it bubbled with life. This starter gave families the power to bake fresh, tangy bread at home without a single packet of store-bought yeast. In fact, a well-kept starter could live for years. Grandmas often saved a bit from every batch to spark the next one, keeping the cycle alive and delicious. That chewy, slightly sour loaf of sourdough wasn't just food, it was a labor of love, a scent that warmed the whole home, and a quiet act of self-reliance. 19. Bacon grease. Next up, the golden treasure at the bottom of the skillet, bacon grease. After frying bacon, Grandma never tossed out the fat. She'd carefully strain it into a tin or glass jar, where it would cool into a creamy, smoky spread of flavor-packed goodness. This wasn't just waste, it was pure kitchen gold. She used it to fry eggs, saute veggies, and grease pans for baking. A spoonful of bacon grease could transform plain beans, greens, or even cornbread with its rich, savory depth. For grandmas, especially those who lived through lean times, bacon grease was proof that nothing should go to waste. It was flavor, thrift, and ingenuity all in one jar. 20. Cornmeal. Simple, hearty, and essential. Ground from dried corn, this humble pantry staple had a special place in the kitchens of the Midwest and South. Grandmas loved it because it was cheap, filling, and could stretch into countless meals. Cornmeal gave us golden skillet cornbread, crispy fritters, comforting mush, and crunchy coatings for fried foods. It was also used as a thickener for soups and stews. Long-lasting and easy to store, cornmeal was perfect during hard times like the Great Depression. For many grandmas, it was more than a food, it was tradition, survival, and a connection to the land. 21st, preserves. When the fruit was ripe and the days were long, Grandma got to work making preserves. These thick, sweet spreads were made by simmering fresh berries, peaches, or apricots with sugar until they transformed into jars of jammy gold. Preserves were a way to capture summer in a jar, stored away for the colder months. Spread on toast, spooned into pastries, or paired with cheese, they were versatile and deeply personal. Making preserves wasn't just a chore, it was a family ritual. Generations gathered to peel, stir, and seal, learning from grandma how to turn fruit into love. Her homemade jars weren't just pantry items, they were memories. 22nd, evaporated milk. If you peeked into grandma's pantry, chances are you'd find a few cans of evaporated milk. Made by removing most of the water from regular milk, this shelf-stable wonder was a lifesaver, especially when fresh milk was scarce or too expensive. Creamy, rich, and endlessly useful, evaporated milk went into everything. Mac and cheese, custards, puddings, gravies, soups, and even baked goods. It brought depth and texture and gave meals a homemade richness. When there was no fresh milk in the fridge, a can of evaporated milk always came through. It was one of those quiet staples that made magic happen in grandma's kitchen. 23rd, dried peas. Dried peas, humble, dependable, and deeply nourishing. A bag of them could last for ages, and when soaked and simmered, they made a hearty foundation for soups, stews, and casseroles. Grandma knew just how to coax out their flavor. She'd often soak them overnight, then slow cook them until they melted into thick, comforting broths. Split pea soup was a favorite, simple but satisfying, often made with bits of leftover ham or vegetables. Dried peas were a frugal powerhouse, stretching meals without stretching the budget. For many grandmas, they were a pantry lifeline. 24. Canned vegetables. When fresh produce wasn't available or was too expensive, canned vegetables came to the rescue. Lined up neatly on pantry shelves, they were colorful proof of grandma's planning and care. Long-lasting and affordable, these cans made sure veggies were always on hand. From green beans to corn, tomatoes to peas, canned vegetables found their way into soups, stews, casseroles, and side dishes. During hard times like the Great Depression and World War II, they were essential. Grandmas bought them in bulk, knowing they could rely on them to feed their families. Practical, versatile, and endlessly helpful, canned veggies were silent partners in countless home-cooked meals. 25th. Lentil soup. Lentil soup was the unsung hero of Grandma's kitchen, a one-pot wonder that could feed a crowd on a shoestring. Lentils were cheap, packed with nutrition, and didn't need much to shine. Onions, garlic, a few chopped carrots, and some herbs. That's all it took to turn them into a belly-warming meal. And Grandma never wasted an opportunity. She'd toss in bits of leftover ham, sausage, or vegetables to stretch the flavor even further. The smell of lentil soup simmering on the stove was enough to gather the whole family around the table. It wasn't just food, it was home. 26. Dried herbs. Grandma's spice shelf was like a tiny apothecary of flavor. Dried herbs, whether homegrown or store-bought, were her secret weapon. Jars of oregano, rosemary, thyme, and sage stood ready to breathe life into every dish. A pinch here, a sprinkle there, and suddenly a plain pot of stew became Sunday dinner worthy. Dried herbs were cheap, lasted forever, and brought out the best in everything they touched. Whether it was a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, or vegetable soup, Grandma always knew exactly which herb to use to make it sing. 27th, pemmican last, but definitely not least. Pemmican. This traditional Native American food, made by blending dried meat with fat and sometimes berries, was a high-energy, long-lasting survival snack. For Grandma, especially in rural homes or pioneer-like settings, pemmican was both a treat and a necessity. Before refrigeration, pemmican was a way to preserve meat for the long haul. It was dense, filling, and packed with nutrients, often made in batches and stored for winter or lean times. More than just food, it was a link to self-sufficiency, tradition, and the practical know-how that defined our grandmother's kitchens. And with that, we wrap up this nostalgic journey through the pantry staples that kept our grandma's kitchens running strong. If there's a memory you'd like to share or an item we missed, tell us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.